The protests across Iran are the biggest in the country since 2022, when the death of Mahsa Amini triggered nationwide demonstrations. So why are people out protesting this time round?
Thank you for having me. As you suggested, this the spark of this came from the heart of Tehran's economy, the Grand Bazaar, with shop owners and merchants essentially going on strikes, closing shops, and then turning that into street protests. And then it spread across the city in Tehran and across the country in many cities, as we have seen. Inflation, sharp decline of the value of the Iranian currency against the dollar, and just unbearable economic situations that have really impacted everyday lives of Iranians was the spark of this. But we can't just say these are economic protests. I want to emphasize that this also goes to sort of the core of the governance. People see years of mismanagement and corruption in the country, also in the shadow of very severe economic sanctions. And all of that has delivered an economy that is just not working for the Iranian middle classes and working classes, while it also enriches a small group of elite. So there are people who actually benefit from this type of economy, and sort of that division in the society also adds fuel to the anger.
And what do you make of President Donald Trump's warning to Iran that the US Army is locked and loaded and ready to go in regards to these protests that are happening?
I think it's absolutely irresponsible and reckless. First of all, I don't think anybody believes that the U.S. Army is ready to protect the rights of Iranian protesters, peaceful protests. We don't really see that happening even here in the United States. In fact, we see the opposite against peaceful protesters in the United States. And so this is definitely a political move. It's a political statement. It goes in line with the president's maximum pressure policy against Iran, which he started in his first term and then the second term. And it's in the sort of the backdrop of what we saw in the past few months with the Israeli attacks on Iran in June, the 12-day war that the U.S. also joined in attacking Iran, and now the threats that have been coming. I think obviously the off-ramp for both sides for getting out of this cycle of conflict would be diplomacy, but unfortunately there seems to be a deadlock on diplomacy as well. None of the two sides are willing to meet the other halfway, and I think this sort of statement from President Trump is very much related to that scene, the kind of impasse that exists with diplomacy, and not so much a care for Iranian protesters.
And as you say, you feel it's irresponsible what Donald Trump has said, but reports suggest protesters on the streets of Iran are actually calling for the overthrow of Ayatollah Khamenei. If the US does get involved again, is a regime change actually likely to happen in Iran? Because you mentioned the 12-day war to me, and when that was happening, there was a lot of talk about regime change.
I think that's a little bit misguided, because I want to separate the internal dissent from what's happening as far as a foreign threat. And this is not just an abstract. We've seen examples across the region of Iraq and Afghanistan, Libya. I don't think this kind of military attack from the outside, sort of bombs falling from the sky, is really going to help the internal problems of the Iranian people. Now, the Iranian people obviously can decide their own fate, their own governance, and their own future. But we really haven't seen, especially with the U.S. boots on the ground military attack on countries in the name of nation building. You know, that was what was supposed to happen in Afghanistan, in Iraq. We don't really see that. And also put this in the backdrop of the entire region. This is not going to be limited to a conflict between Iran, Israel, and the U.S. This is going to very quickly spread to Iran's neighbors. Iraq has already been involved, countries in the Gulf, the rest of the Middle East. Iran is one of the most largest populous countries in that region. If this conflict gets brewing in Iran, it's definitely going to spread to the region, bring more instability, more conflict, and just much more consequences as a result of that. So I don't think any good is going to come out of this if we add a military attack from the outside to an already chaotic situation in Iran.
Okay, so military intervention is not a good idea. So right now we're seeing these protests across Iran, and people are, as you say, really struggling because inflation is so high. The economy is really suffering. Iran has sanctions on it. So what's the answer to get the country back to a stable place and for Iranians to actually live a normal life, to make money and to be fairly safe in the country?
Well, ironically, if we want to get to a place, like you're saying, of peace and stability, not just for Iranians, but also for their neighbors, everyone across the region, the path forward is not conflict. Of course, first and foremost, the Iranian leaders are responsible for the future of their own country, of their people. So trying to pursue diplomacy, less conflict in the region, less destabilizing of their own situation, of their neighbors, and also approaching the U.S. to try to resolve this conflict situation, which comes with very severe economic sanctions, through diplomacy. Of course, first and foremost, their responsibility. But on the U.S. side, if the U.S. also wants to help, more pressure, more conflict, more bombing, more war is not going to help the situation. The result on the ground, the Iranian economy in shambles that we currently see, yes, it's first the responsibility of their leaders, but it's also a result of very severe years of U.S. economic sanctions. So ironically, if the U.S. wants to really help the Iranian people who are paying the price for these economic sanctions, that's going to be the path to pursue diplomacy with their own goals, but then also with an end goal where that you would remove this economic pressure from Iran, from the Iranian people, and get to a place where diplomacy and sort of peace and stability is the goal, and not just more conflict in perpetual cycles of bombing or more war.
Negar Mortazavi, it was brilliant to have you on, and your thoughts. Thank you so much for your time.